next up we have is Fate Zero, which is the next entry to come out after Fate Stay Night, which I did take a look at last year. But as you can tell from the title of Fate Zero, it's a prequel. But I will let you all know that I am going to be recapping a couple things that I said within the first review, but anyways, one thing I will have to say is that in case you didn't know, the Fate series is actually based after a video game, and it was a visual novel that was only released in Japan, although of course there are fan translations. But as time went on, we eventually did get some games in the series released outside of Japan. So there's one on the PSP, which is a turn-based RPG, and then there's one on the PS4 and the Vita, which is an action RPG, kinda like Dynasty Warriors. And maybe someday I might have to do a game review series on the entire thing, but anyways, I just wanted to briefly talk about that. So anyways, now we'll start talking about Fate Zero's story. So it takes place 10 years prior to the first series, and there is another Holy Grail War, so here's what I have to explain about that. So basically, there are 7 mages that are called masters, and they can summon heroic spirits, which are called servants. And all the servants are based after real-life historical figures. And most of the mages are all a part of a royal family that are trying to duke it out for centuries. So they all take part in a survival game called the Holy Grail Wars, where they all have to eliminate each other, and the last one standing will win the Holy Grail, which basically allows them to grant any wish they want. In some aspects, it kinda reminds you of like the Hunger Games. But one last thing to mention about the Holy Grail Wars is that all the masters get some command seals. And after a master uses their command seals, the servant has to obey. And they only have 3 each, and once you use them up, it's gone for good. So you should only use a command seal if there's an emergency or when it's very necessary. So let's get into some of the characters that are taking part. So there's Kiritsugu, who was hired by the Eisenberg family to represent during the Holy Grail Wars, considering that his wife Iris Vale is also a part of that family. And their servant is known as Saber, and she is based after the King of Knights, Artoria Pendragon. And then there's Kyrie, who is the Master Assassin, and he works under Tokime, who is the father of Rin from the first series. And their servant is known as Archer, who is based after Gilgamesh. And then there's Waver, who is a college student, where he was upset with his teacher and he happened to steal one of his books, and that happened to be the book to summon Ryder. And Ryder is based after Ixander, or also known as Alexander the Great. And then there's Karia, who is a part of the Mato family, and he wanted to join the Holy Grail Wars to save his daughter. But he also had to bear the burden by inserting crest worms inside him, which is just pretty nasty. So the servant that he takes over is Berserker, who is based after Lancelot of the Lake. And then there's Ryo Sasuke, who is a complete maniac because he's a massive serial killer. So he ends up finding a book and killing some random family to use their blood to make the Croft Circle and to summon Castor. And Castor is based after Gilles de Rais. I probably screwed up his name, but basically he was a French leader. But one thing I should mention is that I'm gonna warn you that this one is much more darker than the first series, not only because there's a lot more blood in the show, but there's also a lot of kids getting killed. So these two characters don't care about the whole Holy Grail Wars, all they want to do is just start kidnapping children and killing them, which just makes it really fucked up. And the next one is Kenneth Archibald, and he is the teacher of Waver, who just happens to be a huge dick. And originally, he was supposed to have Ryder, but since it was stolen, he happened to take upon Lancer. And he happened to be based after Daramun Undumbai. Yeah, I probably fucked up that name too. And then there's Assassin, who divides himself into many different parts. So those are all the characters that participate in the Holy Grail Wars. Of course, there's many other characters within this show, but I don't want to get too much into it because I think I've gone on long enough. But you also do see characters within the first series in here, but they are young kids. But for the most part, the basic of the story here is a lot like the one in the first series, where it's a survival game for the last one standing, but sometimes there will be temporary alliances so then they can take out bigger threats. And even some of the masters fight against each other as well. And all the servants are pretty accurate when it comes to basing after their historical figures. And yes, this also does include the psychopath. So with that said, there's not a whole lot I can really say about specific details since I don't want to get too much into the spoiler stuff. And I also don't want to be here for an hour because there's a whole lot of lore that goes into this one. But to sum it up, it's the same concept, it just takes place 10 years prior. And as I said, it's also much more darker in tone. So anyways, now we start taking a look at the other things like the animation. And I really do like the animation quite a lot here. So I really like the overall art style, I like all the backgrounds, I like all the character designs, all the fight scenes are great, and it just has a lot of awesome atmosphere. Hell, even the 3D and CGI effects in this one are still pretty good. Except one thing. But thankfully it's only one thing, and that happens to be the cars. I find all the cars in this one just look like really lazy looking plastic. I don't know what it is with animes trying to make cars looking like in 3D look like crap. Just for some examples I've already taken a look at, like the F-Zero anime, which I did a review on last year, and then there's also Skullman, which I did a review on not that long ago. And then there's this one. They all happen to just make crappy looking cars, but thankfully in the second half of this series they did improve a lot of this 3D stuff. And the rest of the animation actually looks even better, so at least it did make an improvement upon that. So with that being said, I do find that the animation overall is still really awesome looking, and as for the show's music, it's also really damn awesome. So there's a lot of variety within the music, and I think it all sounds great. I don't really have any complaints about the music whatsoever, although I'm still unsure if all the music in this show is accurate to the game's music since I haven't played the game yet, but regardless, it's still really good music that is also pretty memorable. And the opening theme song is pretty good too, but I will say, as much as I do like the opening theme song here, I do kind of prefer the one for the first series a little bit more, but either way, they're both great. And as for the voice acting, it's pretty spot on if I say so myself. But since there's a lot of characters here, I'm not going to go too much into detail, but I'll just name off some of the cast. So you have Matthew Mercer, Carey Wellgren, Bridget Hoffman, Crispin Freeman, David Vincent, Jameson Pierce, Lucian Dodge, Mark Darrison, Kerry Karanen, Liam O'Brien, Kyle Hebert, Grant George, Karen Strassman, Dan Warren, Johnny Young Bosch, Patrick Sates, Michael Dobovan, and then finally I'll mention is Wendy Lee and Michelle Ruff, so with this alone, that's pretty damn fucking awesome. And of course there's a few more, but they're pretty minor roles, but for the most part though, I think everyone did a really good job here. Then again, the voice director was done by Tony Oliver, who is not only a good voice actor, but also does do a really good job with voice directing. So you just know that this one is just going to be awesome. So before I give away the score, one thing I do want to mention here is just do a little bit of a recap of what I said about the first series. So the first one was done in 2006, and I really liked it a hell lot. But apparently I'm really weird for saying such a thing because it's actually pretty unpopular to like that series. And the reason why is because it has to do with the fact that it didn't accurately portray the game properly, but since I never played the game, you know, how would I have known about that? But just to say from my personal experience, I really liked it a hell lot and gave it a 9, although thinking about it now, maybe I should have given it an 8, but anyways, I still liked it, but I find that Fate Zero is pretty much better in every way. So because of this, if I were to rate this one, I'm gonna give it a 10 out of 10. So yes, we all know that just because I give something a 10 out of 10 doesn't mean that it's like the best show in the world or that it's like there's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. I mean, come on, did you hear about me complaining about the cars? But anyways, I'm sure as you know, when I give something a 10 out of 10, it just means that it's just a huge favorite of mine, and this one, yeah, it's definitely that. So all the characters in this one are very likable and have a whole lot of development and really interesting interactions. And it has a great mixture between serious and fun, but doesn't go over the top. The overall concept is really awesome, and there's a lot of great scenes that are very memorable. And of course all the other things like the animation, the music, and the voice acting is all good shit. So if you're like me who went into the first series not knowing a whole lot about it and ended up really liking it, then you'll definitely like this one for sure. But I have heard that Fate Zero is actually pretty accurate to the game's story, so even if you didn't like the first one with it not being accurate, then this one would definitely be it. But I can't confirm that for myself because as I said, I haven't played the game, but that's just from what I've heard. And speaking of the game, you're probably all thinking, well, you gotta play the game, son. Well, I'd really like to play the game since I really like the concept and the story and characters and such. But the main problem is that it's a visual novel, and I'm not a huge fan of those. But there are a few exceptions, like Danganronpa, Phoenix Wright, Root Letter, and the Zero Escape series. And I think that's pretty much it, so with that said, it might take me a very long time to get into the visual novel since, as I said, I'm not a huge fan of the genre as a whole, but maybe one day I'll just have to get my lazy ass out there. But anyways, as for Fate Zero as a whole, it's fucking awesome and it's a huge favorite of mine. And I would highly recommend it, but of course I would recommend watching this one first before watching the other one, since it is a prequel. Also, speaking of the other one, they actually did do a reboot series called Unlimited Blade Works, but I haven't seen it yet, so I can't comment on it. But it will be one I will take a look at for sure. And yet, there's still elitists out there that still think that there's no such thing as good anime to come out after the year 2000s. Well, I beg to differ, because I think this is actually good.